Welcome to Watch the Book. Today we present Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, published in 1813. In the Bennet household, Mrs. Bennet's singular mission is to marry off her 5 daughters. The arrival of a wealthy single gentleman, Mr. Bingley, at the nearby Netherfield Park estate ignites her ambition. Mrs. Bennet pleads with her sardonic husband to visit Mr. Bingley, as social custom dictates he must make the first move. Mr. Bennet, who enjoys teasing his wife, remains noncommittal and retreats to his library. At the MERYTON Assembly Ball, the charming and lively Mr. Bingley is an instant success. He dances every dance, showing a marked and immediate preference for the eldest Bennet daughter, the beautiful Jane. In stark contrast, Bingley's friend, Mr. Darcy, a man of immense fortune, is found to be proud and disagreeable. He declines all introductions and walks about the room with an air of profound disdain for the local society. While Elizabeth Bennet is sitting out a dance, she overhears Mr. Darcy coldly dismiss his friend's suggestion to dance with her. He remarks that she is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt him. Though slighted, Elizabeth's lively and playful disposition allows her to recount the story with great spirit among her friends, finding amusement in the sheer absurdity of Mr. Darcy's arrogance and pride. Later, Jane confides in Elizabeth about her deep admiration for Mr. Bingley's kind and easy manners. Elizabeth, more cynical, is pleased for her sister but cautions her to be guarded with her heart. A note arrives from Netherfield, inviting Jane to dine. Mrs. Bennet, scheming, insists Jane go on horseback, hoping the impending rain will force her to stay the night and spend more time with Mr. Bingley. The scheme works. Jane is caught in the rain and falls ill with a severe cold, forcing her to remain at Netherfield. Mrs. Bennet is delighted at the news, seeing it as a great success for her matchmaking plans. Determined to nurse her sister, Elizabeth undertakes the 3-mile walk to Netherfield alone. She arrives with muddy stockings and a face glowing from exercise, much to the surprise and quiet contempt of Miss Bingley. Elizabeth finds Jane genuinely unwell and stays to care for her. In the drawing room that evening, she observes the Netherfield party. Miss Bingley fawns over Mr. Darcy, who is absorbed in a book. During a debate about the qualities of an accomplished woman, Elizabeth challenges Mr. Darcy's impossibly high standards, stating she is surprised he knows any accomplished women at all. The next day, Mrs. Bennet arrives with Lydia and Kitty to visit the sick Jane. She proceeds to embarrass Elizabeth with her boastful talk and thinly veiled criticisms of Mr. Darcy's prideful demeanor. Lydia, bold and unrestrained, reminds Mr. Bingley of his promise to give a ball at Netherfield. He graciously agrees, promising to set a date as soon as Jane has fully recovered from her illness. After her mother and sisters depart, Elizabeth joins the party in the drawing room. She observes Miss Bingley's desperate attempts to gain Mr. Darcy's attention as he writes a letter to his sister. At Miss Bingley's invitation, Elizabeth takes a turn about the room. Mr. Darcy looks up from his book, and a tense, witty conversation about pride and ridicule ensues between him and Elizabeth. Soon after Jane and Elizabeth return to Longbourn, their cousin, Mr. Collins, arrives. He is a pompous and sycophantic clergyman who stands to inherit the Bennet estate due to the entail. Mr. Collins announces his intention to marry one of the Bennet daughters as a way of making amends for the entail. His gaze first settles on Jane, but Mrs. Bennet quickly steers him towards Elizabeth. During a walk to MERYTON, the Bennet sisters meet the charming Mr. Wickham, a new officer in the militia. He possesses a pleasing address and handsome features that instantly attract attention. As they are all conversing, Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley ride by. Upon seeing Mr. Wickham, both he and Darcy exhibit a visible and mutual animosity, changing color and exchanging a cold, stiff salutation. At a party at her Aunt Philip's house, Elizabeth finds herself seated next to Mr. Wickham, He explains his history with Darcy, claiming Darcy's late father was his godfather and promised him a valuable living. Wickham alleges that a jealous Mr. Darcy, defying his own father's will, withheld the church living from him, leaving him impoverished and forcing him into a military career he was never intended for. Elizabeth is shocked and outraged by this story of injustice. All her existing dislike for Darcy is cemented, and she is fully convinced of Wickham's virtue and Darcy's villainy, seeing Wickham as a blameless victim. The long-awaited Netherfield ball arrives. Elizabeth, eager to dance with Wickham, is disappointed to learn he was called away to town, an absence she immediately blames on Mr. Darcy's malevolent influence. Mr. Darcy surprises Elizabeth by asking her for a dance. Their conversation is tense and filled with veiled barbs as they debate character, prejudice, and his past actions, leaving both of them dissatisfied. In the days following the ball, a letter arrives from Miss Bingley, informing Jane that the entire Netherfield party has left for London for the winter, with no definite plans to return to Hertfordshire. Elizabeth tries to convince a heartbroken Jane that this is Miss Bingley's scheme to separate her from Charles and promote a match between him and Georgiana Darcy, but Jane refuses to believe in such duplicity. Mr. Collins, in a highly formal and rehearsed manner, proposes marriage to Elizabeth. He lists his pragmatic reasons, including the advice of his patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, expecting no answer but acceptance. Elizabeth firmly and unequivocally refuses his offer. Mr. Collins, however, dismisses her refusal as a maidenly affectation, convinced she secretly wishes to accept him and will change her mind. Mrs. Bennet is furious at Elizabeth's refusal and tries to force her to accept. Mr. Bennet, however, sides with his daughter, humorously telling her he will never see her again if she does marry Mr. Collins. Within 3 days, the Bennets are stunned to learn that their neighbor and Elizabeth's friend, Charlotte Lucas, has accepted Mr. Collins's proposal, seeking a comfortable home over romantic attachment. Elizabeth is deeply disappointed in her friend, viewing the match as a humiliating sacrifice of every better feeling to worldly advantage. A painful restraint forms between the two friends. Jane travels to London with her aunt and uncle, hoping to see the Bingleys. However, weeks pass, and a cold and brief visit from Caroline Bingley finally convinces Jane that she has been deceived by her friend. Mr. Wickham's attentions shift from Elizabeth to a Miss King, who has recently inherited £10,000. Elizabeth feels only slighted vanity, convincing herself she was never truly in love with him. In March, Elizabeth travels with Sir William Lucas and his daughter to visit the newly married Charlotte Collins in Hunsford, Kent. The parsonage is neat, well-ordered, and directly adjacent to Rosings Park. Elizabeth and her party are invited to dine at Rosings Park. There she meets the formidable Lady Catherine de Bourgh, Mr. Collins' patroness and Mr. Darcy's aunt, who is arrogant and domineering. Lady Catherine subjects Elizabeth to a barrage of impertinent questions about her family, upbringing, and accomplishments, expressing shock at the lack of a governess and the Bennet sisters' social standing. After Easter, Mr. Darcy and his cousin, Colonel Fitzwilliam, arrive to visit their aunt at Rosings. They call at the parsonage, and Colonel Fitzwilliam proves to be a charming and well-bred gentleman. During an evening at Rosings, Colonel Fitzwilliam engages Elizabeth in a lively conversation. Darcy draws near the pianoforte as she plays, leading to another verbal sparring match between them. In her solitary walks through the park, Elizabeth unexpectedly encounters Mr. Darcy on several occasions. Their conversations are brief and somewhat awkward, leaving her puzzled by his continued attention. While walking, Colonel Fitzwilliam tells Elizabeth that Darcy recently saved a friend, implied to be Bingley, from an imprudent marriage, citing strong objections to the lady's family. Elizabeth is furious, realizing Darcy was the principal agent in ruining her sister's happiness. The pain of this knowledge, combined with the indecorum of her own family, weighs heavily on her heart. While Elizabeth is alone at the parsonage, Mr. Darcy pays a surprise visit. After a few minutes of strained silence, he stuns her by making an ardent, impassioned declaration of his love for her. Despite his love, Darcy's proposal is filled with pride. He speaks of her inferior connections and the family obstacles that his judgment has long opposed, making it clear he considers the match a degradation. Angered by his insulting manner, Elizabeth flatly rejects him. She confronts him with his role in ruining Jane's happiness and his cruel treatment of Mr. Wickham, declaring him the last man she would ever marry. Shocked and resentful, Darcy admits he separated Jane and Bingley, believing Jane's feelings were not serious. He also hints at a deeper, more malicious history concerning Mr. Wickham. The next morning, a composed Darcy finds Elizabeth on her walk and hands her a long letter. He asks her to read it, stating that his character requires the explanation contained within its pages. In the letter, Darcy explains he separated Jane and Bingley because he genuinely perceived her to be indifferent, and he wished to protect his friend from the impropriety of her family's public behavior. The letter then reveals the true character of Mr. Wickham. After Darcy's father's death, Wickham accepted £3,000 in lieu of the promised church living, then squandered it through a life of idleness. Most shockingly, the letter discloses that last summer, Wickham attempted to elope with Darcy's 15-year-old sister Georgiana in a scheme to secure her £30,000 inheritance. Elizabeth is thrown into turmoil. As she rereads the letter, she begins to see the truth in Darcy's account, recalling Wickham's inconsistencies and the impropriety of his confidences to her, a stranger. She is forced to confront her own blindness and prejudice. She realizes she has been absurdly partial, pleased by one's flattery and offended by the other's neglect, and has driven reason completely away. Full of shame and regret, Elizabeth acknowledges the justice in Darcy's criticisms of her family's behavior. Her opinion of him is completely overturned, replaced with a newfound respect and gratitude. On her journey home, Elizabeth joins her aunt and uncle, the Gardeners, on a tour of Derbyshire. By chance, their route takes them near Pemberley, Mr. Darcy's grand estate. Believing the family to be away, Elizabeth agrees to visit Pemberley. She is immediately captivated by the estate's natural beauty, where taste has enhanced nature without destroying it. Inside, the housekeeper speaks of Mr. Darcy in glowing terms, describing him as a kind, sweet-tempered, and generous master, the best of landlords and brothers, completely contrary to Elizabeth's prior beliefs. As Elizabeth and the Gardeners are admiring the grounds, Mr. Darcy himself makes an unexpected and abrupt appearance, having arrived a day earlier than his household was expecting him. Both are deeply embarrassed, but Darcy's demeanor is completely changed. He is gentle, civil, and free from his usual pride, making polite conversation and treating her relations with surprising warmth. The next day, Darcy brings his shy sister Georgiana to visit Elizabeth at her inn. He also brings Mr. Bingley, who is delighted to see Elizabeth and makes subtle, tender inquiries about Jane. This new, humble Darcy, eager to please and to foster a friendship between her and his sister, deepens Elizabeth's gratitude and confusion, leaving her to wonder at the remarkable change in him. Just as her feelings are in a state of flux, Elizabeth receives 2 urgent letters from Jane. The first relates the shocking news that their youngest sister Lydia has eloped to Scotland with Mr. Wickham. The second letter contains even worse news. It is now feared they have not gone to Scotland at all, and that Wickham has no intention of marrying Lydia, a situation that would mean utter ruin and disgrace for the entire Bennet family. As Elizabeth receives this catastrophic news, Mr. Darcy enters the room. Seeing her distress, he learns of the elopement. He grows grave and thoughtful, and Elizabeth is certain that this family disgrace has extinguished his love forever. Elizabeth and the Gardiners rush back to Longbourn to find the house in disarray. Mrs. Bennet is ill in her room, and Mr. Bennet has gone to London with Colonel Forster in a desperate search for Lydia. Days pass with no word, deepening the family's despair. A letter arrives from Mr. Collins, offering condolences filled with sanctimonious reproach and quoting Lady Catherine's views on their family's disgrace. Finally, a letter comes from Mr. Gardiner. Lydia and Wickham have been found in London, unmarried. Wickham has agreed to marry Lydia in exchange for her share of inheritance and an annual stipend. The family is relieved but confused. Mr. Bennet knows Wickham would never marry Lydia for so little. He realizes his generous brother-in-law, Mr. Gardiner, must have paid Wickham a substantial sum to save Lydia's honor. After their wedding in London, Lydia and Wickham visit Longbourn before joining his new post in the north. Lydia is boastful and entirely unashamed, showing off her ring and talking incessantly of her dear Wickham. During her stay, Lydia lets slip that Mr. Darcy was present at her wedding. Elizabeth is utterly astonished and immediately writes to her aunt, Mrs. Gardiner, demanding an explanation for his involvement. Mrs. Gardiner's reply reveals the stunning truth. It was Mr. Darcy who found the couple, settled all of Wickham's formidable debts, and paid him the money that secured the marriage, all from a desire to shield Elizabeth from pain. Elizabeth is overwhelmed by this act of generosity. She is humbled by the debt they owe him and proud of the man who could overcome his pride for her sake. Her heart fills with love and admiration for him. Shortly after Lydia's departure, news arrives that Mr. Bingley is returning to Netherfield. He soon visits Longbourn, accompanied by Mr. Darcy, much to the family's surprise. At a dinner party at Longbourn, Bingley seats himself next to Jane. His attentions are renewed and unmistakable, and Elizabeth watches with quiet delight, observing Darcy's composed approval. With a little help from Mrs. Bennet's unsubtle scheming to leave them alone, Mr. Bingley finds the opportunity to speak with Jane. He confesses his love, and the two become happily engaged. A week later, Lady Catherine de Bourgh makes a surprise, unannounced visit to Longbourn. She has heard a rumor that Elizabeth is to marry her nephew and has come to forbid it in the strongest terms. Lady Catherine insists that Darcy is engaged to her own daughter. She insults Elizabeth's family and demands that she promise never to accept an offer from Darcy. Elizabeth flatly refuses. Elizabeth's refusal to be intimidated by her ladyship's demands, while unsettling, gives her a secret hope. She realizes that Darcy has not been dissuaded from his original intentions. Lady Catherine's interference has the opposite of its intended effect. When she reports Elizabeth's stubborn refusal to Darcy, it gives him the hope that her feelings for him have changed since his first proposal. Soon after, Darcy returns to Hertfordshire and joins Elizabeth for a walk. She takes the opportunity to thank him for his incredible kindness in the matter of Lydia's marriage. Darcy confesses his feelings and wishes are unchanged and asks if hers have altered. Elizabeth joyfully accepts him, admitting her own sentiments have undergone a material and complete change. Darcy explains that her reproofs at Hunsford humbled him and forced him to re-evaluate his own pride and behavior, while she in turn expresses her shame at her own prejudices, which blinded her to his true character. Elizabeth shares the news with a delighted Jane. Mr. Bennet is astonished, having always believed Elizabeth disliked Darcy, but gives his heartfelt consent upon learning of her true feelings and Darcy's good character. Mrs. Bennet is struck dumb by the news, but quickly recovers to celebrate the astonishing match, immediately planning for the wealth and status her daughter will acquire as the mistress of Pemberley. The two happy couples, Jane and Bingley and Elizabeth and Darcy, find joy in their shared futures. spending time together and looking forward to a life of affection, understanding, and mutual respect. Both couples marry. Jane and Bingley eventually purchase an estate in Derbyshire to be near Elizabeth and Darcy at Pemberley, and the two sisters, so devoted to each other, enjoy a life of perfect felicity. If you enjoyed this retelling of a classic, please subscribe to Watch the Book for more stories brought to life. We look forward to seeing you again.